guys! Hi everyone! Welcome to the first YouTube live stream of 2022. That should be cause for some sort of celebration or something. Today we're going to be reading chapter 12 from my book Saving Destiny. Out of all my novels, Saving Destiny has the most elements of my real life experiences woven in. For those of you who haven't heard the first chapters of the book, I'll quickly explain that in alternating viewpoints, Destiny and her mother Bonnie tell the story of a family facing the monsters that are childhood-onset schizoaffective disorder and gastroparesis. Destiny had been using medical and psych hospitals like a revolving door from ages 10 to 16. At age 16 and a half, she became terrified of turning 17 because of the hallucinations she was hearing that were explaining to her that the world was going to end if she didn't do something about it. She began cheeking her meds and stockpiling them to overdose on. But her mom and her therapist intervened when they saw her behavior getting more and more erratic. They had no choice but to place her in the Jackson Center, a residential treatment center for kids too mentally unstable to live in the community. But Destiny planned on being the most model patient and getting out of there in a month instead of the 12 to 18 month stay that most of the kids were supposed to have. So here we are. We'll start reading chapter 12, which begins with Bonnie, Destiny's mom's perspective. We continued to visit Destiny almost every day, and she was mostly happy. She still complained a little bit about her summer job program, where she had to be in the hot sun gardening on grounds all morning. But other than that, she was content. In the meantime, Destiny's birthday was now only a little over 2 months away. She was holding herself more stiffly and was much quieter. I didn't mention the issue to her. Eliza's Destiny's therapist, Eliza suggested that we talk about other topics, and she assured me that she would help Destiny prepare for the day. It may end up being necessary to hospitalize Destiny if she struggles too much on her birthday. I just want to prepare you. We just need to do it. It is important not to view it as a failure on anyone's part. We just need to do whatever needs to be done to keep Destiny safe, Eliza explained to me. I understood what she was trying to tell me, but I wanted to be done with the hospitals. I wanted her to be starting a new chapter in her life that did not include locked psychiatric units. Every time I saw Destiny, I silently evaluated her and tried to convince myself that everything would be okay. I bought her a new sketchbook and brand new professional artist grade pencils to keep her busy during free time. Thanks, Mom. These are great. She hugged me tightly. As I hugged her back, I tried to ignore how much bonier and smaller her body had become. Now we switch to Destiny's perspective. This is Destiny's perspective. Destiny. It was 9 weeks before my birthday. I was so busy worrying about my birthday that I almost didn't notice the itchy rash at first. There were no obvious signs of it until I was outside with Lori. Lori is the head of the horticulture, they call it, or the gardening program. I was outside with Lori and the other 2 boys, who were busy weeding a flower patch. My stomach started to itch under my t-shirt. At first I tried to ignore it, but it was too itchy, and I had to scratch and rub at it. Then, my arms started to itch, and when I looked down at it, I saw a faint red rash appearing. The sun beat down on my skin, and the itch intensified. Lori? I tapped Lori on the shoulder. Yeah? Lori turned to look at me. I have a really itchy rash, I told her, and showed her my arms. It now spread to both of them. The bumps were getting redder before my eyes. "Oh dear," Lori said, looking at my arms. "We better get you over to the nurse." Justin, from the boys' house, was on level 2, and Evan was just a day student, so they were allowed to be on campus by themselves. "You guys keep bleeding. I'll be back. I just need to take Destiny to the nurse." The boys looked up from the dirt patch of gnarly plants and weeds and nodded. Lori led me across the campus and into the therapist building. The nurse's office was the first door at the top of the super narrow staircase. Lori knocked at the door, and Anne opened it up for me. Anne's the nurse. She's the charge nurse. "Destiny has a rash all over her arms," Lori told her. I held out my arms to show Anne. "Okay, I'll take a look. I'll call you when she's all set," Anne told Lori. Then she ushered me into her office and had me sit down on a cot she had in the corner. Grateful to put down my heavy tube-feeding backpack, I collapsed into it. "Now when did this rash start?" Anne asked me. "I just started noticing it about half an hour ago," I told her. "Is it just on your arms?" she asked. "No, I think it's on my stomach as well," I told her. I lifted up my butterfly and rainbow t-shirt to check, and sure enough, there was an angry red rash all over my stomach as well. Maybe it's heat rash," Anne said. "How do you feel otherwise?" "Really drained and tired," I admitted. In fact, I was so tired that I barely had the energy to sit up. But I had to wonder why I would get heat rash after almost a month of working in the sun without getting heat rash in the same temperatures. "Okay, let me see what your standing orders are." Anne pulled out a folder with my name on it and began leafing through it. "Okay, it looks like you can have children's Benadryl," she told me. Anne took my feeding pump out of my backpack that was lying on the ground next to the cot I was sitting on. She paused my feeds, disconnected my tubing, and pushed the liquidy Benadryl through my J-tube. After she flushed my tube with sterile water to make sure all the medicine got all the way in and to prevent the tube from clogging, she hooked me back up to my tubing, but was still holding the pump. She was pressing a whole bunch of buttons. "I'm going to set your pump to run 250 ml of water over the next 2 hours. You can lay back and rest on this cot while the Benadryl kicks in and you're getting your extra water," Anne told me. I leaned back. The cool cotton sheets felt nice against my burning face. I tucked Blinky under my right arm and let my eyes drift shut. When the nurse woke me up 2 hours later, it was lunchtime. I forced myself to sit up. The room spun around me for a moment. My skin felt hot and itchy. I tried not to scratch too much. My whole body felt heavy. It was a lot of work just to take the few steps toward the door. All I wanted to do was lay down and sleep for hours more. Instead, I forced myself to follow the nurse down the stairs and into the cafeteria. In afternoon school, I worked hard to keep my eyes open, but my legs were itching now too, and my arms and stomach were so itchy that I had to continually scratch them. I couldn't concentrate on anything at all during those 2 classes. The next morning, I woke up feeling even worse, which I didn't think was possible. The rash was now all over my legs as well, and it was redder and angrier. Plus, my whole body was burning. I was shaking with chills as well. I was so tired I could barely get out of bed, and I puked into a bucket a couple times before I even picked my head up off the pillow. So I lay there for a few minutes extra. "You need to get up," Becky's booming voice tore through my room. "Well, I don't feel well," I told her. "Well, if you're not dying, you need to get your butt out of bed and over to the summer program," Becky told me. I did feel a little like I was dying. but I didn't want to cause any problems. So I forced myself out of bed. When I stood up, I stumbled a little from the dizziness and then caught my balance. A shiver racked through my body, and I trembled like a dandelion whisper in the breeze. Finally, I managed to get dressed and washed up and dumped the puke bucket and washed that up too. Going down, I called out at the top of the stairs. "Okay," Becky called back. I went down the stairs slowly because I was afraid I'd pass out and tumble down the rest of them. By the time I got to the gardens with Lori, I was on the verge of passing out. Plus, my rash was so incredibly itchy. As soon as I got done itching one spot, a bunch more spots got itchy. I tried to participate like I was supposed to, but as I carried the watering can over to the flower beds, another violent shiver racked my sweaty body, and I dumped the watering can all over the pavement. The whole world felt like it was turning on its side. "I don't feel good," I finally told Lori. Lori looked at me once and said, "Let's get you back to the nurse." Back at the nurse's office, I showed Anne how the rash had spread. She gave me more Benadryl, another 250 milliliters of water through my J-tube over 2 hours, and then had me lie down on the cot again for that whole 2 hours. Relief flooded through me when I lay down and was able to stop fighting the dizziness, but it took a while to fall asleep because I was so incredibly itchy all over. As soon as I woke up, I was insanely itchy again. I knew something was wrong with me, but the nurse was still insisting it was heat rash. Now, I had never had a heat rash before, so I don't know exactly what it would feel like, but something was telling me that this was more than just a heat rash. I went to classes with the other kids in the afternoon, but had no idea what we were supposed to be learning about. All I could focus on was the intense itching and staying conscious. All of the other kids were staring at me and asking me what was wrong with me. I don't know, I told them. The nurse thinks it's heat rash, but I don't know. Almost all of the other kids at the high school that were with it agreed with me that by how much of my body was covered, and by the way the rash looked, almost like bumpy burns, it couldn't be just heat rash. But we were just kids, and we were just mental patients, so that was 2 strikes against us, and it meant our opinions got dismissed very quickly by adults. The other staff had all been told by a professional nurse that I just had a heat rash, so that's what they were going with. Although I could tell a couple of them knew I had something else going on, something that needed immediate medical attention. In the end, though, none of the staff at the Jackson Center ever spoke up for me, even if they knew dismissing it as heat rash was dangerous. That night, the on-grounds activity was kickball. "I really don't feel well," I told Ken. "Well, you still have to participate. You'll get a consequence if you don't," Ken told me. "But I think I'm sick," I insisted. "Well, I'll ask the nurse what she thinks," Ken decided. The nighttime nurse had read what Anne had said about heat rash. "It's a little cooler out now that it's nighttime. You should be fine to participate in the activity," she told me. Not sure how I was going to run, I fearfully crossed the street with Ken and the other girls and walked down to the field. As soon as we got down there, I was overwhelmed by a wave of nausea and dizziness. "I can't do this," I told Ken. "I'll just take the consequence." Ken took me back across the field and the street to the house. He told me to go to my room. "You have 45 minutes of consequence time," he told me. I knew that meant that I had to spend 45 minutes in my room. During that time, I couldn't sleep, play video games, or listen to music, or go on my laptop. At first, I didn't care. I was just happy to be sitting down on my bed. Then, the consequence time turned out to be harder than I'd anticipated, because I had to stay awake. I was so tired that my whole body ached to lie down. My eyes were heavy and kept trying to close. I leaned against the wall and my body kept trying to slump over. "You're going to start collecting if you fall asleep," Ken kept reminding me. Collecting, in this case, meant that for every minute I was asleep, I would earn 1 more minute of extra time that I would have to do the next day. It took all the fight in me that I had not to fall asleep. In addition to that, I had to itch a different part of my body every second. The rash had spread up my neck at that point, and the only part of my body that wasn't covered in itchy red bumps was my face, inside my mouth, and inside my private parts. Finally, Ken told me that I'd completed my consequence time. I immediately got ready for bed and went to sleep. The next day was no better. The nurse told me that I would be switched from the horticulture program to the snack shop program. The horticulture program is what they call the gardening program, where Kat worked. I felt a sense of extreme relief. The hot sun beating on my itchy rash and feverish body. The nurse had never even thought to check my temperature, and I was too scared of being labeled a problem kid to ask her. Was the worst torture imaginable. This way you won't be in the sun, and you'll be able to work with the program like you're supposed to, Anne explained. Your rash should go away, and you shouldn't need to sleep in my office all mornings. I nodded, but I was still feeling skeptical of her theory that this was just a heat rash. This rash seemed just as bad out of the sun as it was in the sun. Besides, if it was just a heat rash, it wouldn't have spread all over my whole body the way it had. It was even on the bottoms of my feet now. Still, I didn't want to argue, so I went along with what they wanted me to do and followed the staff over to the snack shop area. The snack shop was a small store set up next to the cafeteria. Kids and staff could buy snack foods and drinks there. The snack shop also prepared lunches that the staff could purchase. The other kids weren't allowed to buy lunches there, though, which didn't seem fair to me. But who's I to say anything? Meg, the staff who ran the snack shop and was also the math teacher, gave me a big grin. "Hey, nice to see you, Destiny. I can't wait to work with you." I had to smile back. "So today I'll teach you how we do things in snack shop, and then tomorrow you can jump right in with Kat," Meg told me. I watched as Kat and Meg opened up the cash register and set up the money and the tip jar. Then, they did an inventory of everything they had. If they were missing something, they wrote it on a piece of paper titled "Grocery Store." After they set up all the snacks and prepared all the food, and staff bought or ordered various snacks and lunches that Kat would hand-deliver, kids could buy 1 snack a day, but nothing else. There was also that tip jar that Kat and I would split at the end of the day. The whole time Kat and Meg worked, we all talked and made jokes and giggled. Meg and Kat seemed to have a constant banter going, and included me in on it. Despite all the fun I was having, my rash was super itchy again. I found myself frantically scratching at it, moving from body part to body part, with no let-up in between. The Benadryl the nurse had given me a couple hours earlier seemed to be doing nothing. In addition, my head felt heavy and stuffy. My whole body felt like it weighed 400 pounds. The room started to spin. Are you doing okay? Meg asked me. I shook my head no. Do you want to go to the nurse? She questioned. She said I needed to stay here now that I'm not in the sun, I explained. Meg made a brief face that I almost didn't catch. Why don't you sit down at one of the tables and rest your head for a little bit then? Meg suggested. You look very uncomfortable and pale under that awful rash. Okay, I immediately agreed. Have they taken you to the doctor to get checked out? Meg asked me. No, I just saw the nurse, I told her. Another funny expression briefly crossed Meg's face, and then she shook her head slightly and walked back toward behind the snack shop counter. With my head pressed against the cool plastic of the table, I wondered if they were ever going to find out what was really wrong with me. I knew it wasn't a heat rash. When I got back to Sharon House after summer program, I asked CMC if I could just go to my room and lay down since I didn't feel well. There's no reason why you can't do house meeting with us, CMC told me sternly. House meeting only requires you to sit on a couch. I'm sure you can do that much. Every day I found out a little more about why CMC had given me a bad vibe when I first met him. Although at the end of house meeting, he patted me on the shoulder and told me I'd been a good girl. See, sometimes you just have to put your mind to something and do it. Now that you've accomplished your goal of getting your therapeutic work done, I'll have Eden hang out upstairs so you can rest, CMC told me. I was so relieved that he was letting me rest instead of forcing me to sit through snack time, where I had to watch all the other girls eat food I couldn't eat, while my rash itched and my body felt like it had been dried out in the dryer in high heat, and all I wanted to do was sleep for a few hours before I literally passed out unconscious. The next afternoon at school, I was feeling like I could barely stay conscious. Again, I asked the teacher if I could take a voluntary timeout so that I could at least go to the timeout room and lie down on the beanbag chair for a few minutes. Gina left me alone for over 10 minutes, which was nice because I knew that voluntary timeouts were only supposed to last for 5 minutes. Kids were supposed to go back to class after that, or they'd start collecting. I think you're going to need to go back to class, Destiny, Gina finally told me apologetically. I nodded and started to stand up, but when I did, the room spun so sharply that I fell back down. Tears began forming in the corners of my eyes. Everything felt so overwhelming. I'll give you a few more minutes, Gina finally decided. I could tell that she felt bad for me. At least someone did. Things might have turned out okay, but just then, CMC strolled by the timeout room. What's going on in here? He asked me. I'm just taking a voluntary timeout, I choked out. What's got you all worked up? He pressed. I just don't feel well. All I want to do is rest. I'm sick. It doesn't make sense that no one will let me rest, I tried to explain to him. Well, we can't just let you opt out of the program because you're a little tired. What benefit are you getting if you're just lying on a cot in the nurse's office all day? CMC asked me. I don't want to permanently rest up there, just until I feel better, I tried to explain. Well, it's been days now, and you still claim you don't feel well. How long is this going to go on for? CMC demanded. Just until I feel better, I insisted. Well, the nurses have said that you just have heat rash. There's no reason to need to opt out on life because of heat rash. So you need to pull yourself up by your bootstraps and go to class, CMC told me. If you can't do that, then you're going to be collecting. I was still crying, but I followed CMC back up to my classroom. Just outside the door, he stopped and turned to me. Now, you won't be crying in class. You can't be crying in class. It's disruptive. If you cry in class, the teacher will let me know, and you'll be collecting for as long as you're crying. Understand? I took a few deep, ragged breaths and nodded before going into class. I kept my gaze on the floor and sat down at a desk. I knew my eyes were red and swollen, and I was a little embarrassed, but at least now, with the rash having spread to my face, it was really hard to tell that the swelling in my eyes was from crying. The teacher was talking about World War I. I felt silent tears dripping down my face and running into my hair. CMC had a way of making me feel completely off balance. And now we switch back to the mother's perspective for the last page. When I came up to visit Destiny, it had only been 4 days since my last visit, and I'd been told that she had a bit of a rash, so I wasn't at all prepared for what she actually looked like. Destiny was covered, head to toe, in an angry red rash. She had red bumps on her face. Some were distinct and raised, and others were smaller and ran into each other. The rash was all over her neck, shoulders, arms, legs. Any visible part of her body was covered in the rash. In addition to the bumps, Destiny looked run down. Her weight had dropped, and the skin on her face was very pale under the rash. Even her lips looked right where they weren't blistered. I could see in her eyes that she was on the verge of giving up. Immediately, I pulled Destiny into a big hug. "What are they doing about this?" I asked Destiny, trying to keep the worry and anger out of my voice. "Nothing really," Destiny sighed. "They think it's a heat rash, so they switched me out of the horticulture program and into the snack shop program. And they've been giving me Benadryl, but it barely does anything." Destiny sighed again. "I'm not a doctor, but this is not heat rash," I told her. "I know," Destiny agreed. Her frustration was clear. "I also feel like I have a mega version of the flu or something." "I need to talk to the doctor or the nurse," I decided out loud. "I'm going to get to the bottom of this for you." "I've tried talking to the nurse," Destiny informed me, "but she keeps telling me that nothing's wrong and it's just heat rash." "Well, maybe if I talk to her, she'll reconsider," I told Destiny. The whole time during the visit, Destiny was scratching one body part or the other. It made me itchy just watching her. There was something very wrong with my daughter, and I knew this without any doubt. I also knew that if the rash was what I thought it was, we were in a race against the clock to save her life. And that is the end of Saving Destiny, Chapter 12. Alright, guys. Well, I hope you enjoyed this YouTube Live. I hope you tune in for the next ones. Don't forget to share, subscribe, and comment. And keep an eye out for my next YouTube Live, which is going to be Saving Destiny Chapter 13, coming up soon. Love you guys so